Now that we understand how the actual Pascal triangle was built, let's take a look at how we display it in the form of equilateral triangle and also not display anything else other than the actual numbers. That is, basically we are planning to skip the zeros. Now, before doing it, there's a small trick with strings that we need to understand. And in order to do that, let me start a small application which I've installed, uh, which goes by C sharp REPL. And let's create a string. Let's say S is equal to new string. We have several options here. Now, basically, we are using a string constructor instead of simply assigning the value directly. We have a lot of options here on how we construct that string. So we are using the third overloaded version where we actually specify a character which needs to be initialized into S with count number of repetitions. So to be more precise, let's say I actually initialized a star and I gave something like 15. And if I need to visualize it, I'll just print this. So S is now a string of 15 characters, which all are star. So if I happen to do it for something other than star, let's say 2, we will also get the same thing now. But if I say I actually do it for a space, I might not be able to visualize it, but still it just prints a string with all empty spaces. So with this in mind, let's go to the actual code here and let's do what we did previously. We'll just try and trace this out for a 3 by 3 matrix. So if I can write that here, something like 1 1 1 1 2 1, and this is our 0 1 2, and this is also our 0 1 2, something like this. And let's start with row being 0. 0 is less than 3. So we come here and the total rows is 3. Minus 0 is just 3. Star 2 is 6. So initially, we just print 6 empty characters. So which can, if let's say this is, if I need to do it here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we go ahead and print 1. Okay, so that's how we end up getting so much of spaces. Well, it might not be so elaborate here. And then we go ahead and print 1. Let's see how that happens. So this is 0. 0 is less than or equal to 0 because our row is 0. So we go ahead and write whatever is there in the matrix with 0 comma 0, which happens to be 1 here as triangle 1. So we see we are getting space from the starting of the terminal. We've got enough spaces, and this one is also for the internal spacing. Now basically if the number is too big, I want it to occupy a big chunk so that if it's something like 10 or 12, it still does not get combined with the next element. So this is string interpolation. So basically whatever you give here will be interpolated into the actual string with the specified number of spaces. So that particular string will occupy that many number of spaces. You can play around with the spacing here to make the output triangle narrower or wider. So coming back to this, we just finished this loop and we go back here and now this becomes 1. So 1 less than 3. So this time what happens is we have total rows is 3 minus 1, which becomes 2, and again into 2, which becomes 4. So we are having lesser spaces here, and then we go ahead and print the next item in a similar fashion, which will be 1. And we will actually be repeating this a second time for another column. So which goes by, now let's say if we just continue this example, this would again become 0. 0 is less than or equal to 1. We come here and this will be 1 comma 0. So this will be 1 comma 0, which is the element 1. So that's what we got here. And this time we actually make this 1. See, we are in the inner loop and 1 is still less than or equal to 1. So we go ahead and print the next element, which comes, and remember this is console.write, okay, not write line. So this is just console.write. So we actually print the 1 here, but because of this 4, we are taking more space. Remember, we are creating a block here. So we are kind of making a triangle here. So if we just follow this example further, we can see that as and when we keep going further down, we'll have less spacing. And the printing part continues in a similar fashion. So that's how we are playing with the spaces and actually giving a equilateral triangle kind of shape by just using this small trick of printing empty strings at the beginning with lot of spaces for the initial lines, with less spaces for the subsequent lines. And this console.writeLine, of course, ensures that we have a terminating line after each row. So to conclude, we saw how we are printing a left justified triangle as if it was an equilateral triangle. It's just a trick with the strings. The internal representation of these Pascal triangle numbers is still just a two-dimensional matrix. And with this also trick of the loop, by checking the various conditions here, we ensure that we never end up printing the zeros, right? Because we have the suitable conditions for exit, and we only happen to print the actual values, the non-zero values, along with the spacing. And just to conclude, let's just see what happens if we give a very big value, something like 10. We see that most of them are spaced well enough, but as and when the number gets bigger and bigger, the spacing gets narrower. But either ways, we have reserved 4 spaces for a number, so we are still good to go here because we just have this one additional space here, and the other number is also reserved 4 spaces here. So we're somehow able to justify that as a triangle, but maybe with higher values, you might need to play around with the spacing to get the Pascal triangle effect. So that's it for this video series about understanding the implementation of Pascal triangle.